And one of my very favorite use of the entire Bible is a guy by the name of David. David was the son of Jesse. Jesse had several sons, and David was the youngest. And I want to say to you young people, do not let anybody hold you down. Alright? Don't let anybody. Don't let us old people hold you down. Don't let your peers hold you down. Don't let the world hold you down. And we're going to get some inspiration from this young man, David. He got it coming from all sides. But he did a mighty job. Alright? It's amazing what you young people can do today if you want to. You can do anything, be anything that you want to be. And I hope you remember that. So anyhow, this story of David is found in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And if you have your Bibles with you, which I hope you do, go ahead and turn to that. But King David was one of the greatest people of God's in the entire Old Testament. As a matter of fact, we later learn on in the New Testament that David was a man after God's own heart. That's a special place to be. And you can be a young lady or a young man after God's own heart, should you choose to be. So, I want to talk about this guy. Where do you begin with David? Okay, I want to begin with David with a guy by the name of Saul. You got to know this backstory before we're going to know exactly what takes place here. There was a guy by the name of Saul who became the first king of Israel. And this guy was, the Bible said, head and shoulders taller and bigger than everyone else amongst him. He stood out in a crowd. And Saul was a big, strong guy, and he became the king of Israel, the very first king of Israel. But unfortunately, Saul had a failed kingship. He failed to continue to trust in God, and he trusted more in his own power and strength and his own way of doing things instead of submitting completely to God. And so God had to take the kingship from Saul and give it to somebody else. So God says, Samuel, you're my man, you're my prophet. I want you to go to the house of Jesse, and I'm going to show you the guy that I'm going to anoint king of Israel, the next king of Israel. So Samuel gets his flask of oil. He goes to the house of Jesse, and there are Jesse's kids. Big guy like Saul, another guy, another guy, another guy. And so he looks at the big guy and he says, oh man, this has got to be the guy. Look at him, 6'6", 250 pounds. I'm making all that up, you know that, right? All right, but he's a big guy. He thinks, oh, that's the guy right there. He's a warrior. And God said, no, I didn't pick him. All right, maybe it's the next guy. Nope, not picking him. How about the next guy? Nope, not him either. How about the last guy? Nope, not him. Well, what am I to do? And so he asked Jesse, do you have any other kids? Because God hasn't selected any of this. Oh yeah, I got this one little scrawny kid. He's out in the field watching the sheep. Go get him. So they go get the scrawny little kid that's out in the field watching the sheep. And they bring him in, and God said, that's the guy. That's the guy. His name's David. They put him out in the sheep, because that's a terrible job, out watching the sheep. So he was out watching the sheep, and he brought him in. He's the guy. So Samuel anoints him. He's the next king of Israel. All right, well, he continues on watching the sheep, and then later in the book of Samuel, we see that the Philistines, our dreaded enemy, the people on the coast, are on one side of this mountain. The army of Israel is on the other side of the mountain. There's a little valley in between. And this is very common that they would come together like this. And then a very common practice would be, all right, instead of us all just going at it and hacking each other up, you pick your best guy, we'll pick our best guy, we'll come together, those two guys will fight, and whoever wins out of that, we'll call it, you're the winner. Philistines loved this idea because they had a guy by the name of Goliath. Goliath, in our vernacular, is turned into an adjective. If it's a Goliath, it's what? Huge. All right. You guys quit giggling about that, okay? He's huge. All right? So they sent out their big warrior. He was how tall?
Huge.
Huge. Huge. The text says he's over 9 foot. And depending on how you measure a cubit, he was probably around 9'3", 9'6", something like that. Yeah, it is big. I don't think the ceiling is 9 foot, but it's something like that. He's a big guy. And so, of course, he'd come out and he'd scream a bunch of obscenities about our God, and he'd make the nation of Israel and the armies feel terrible, and because they all cower back. Look at the guy, he's 9'3". His armament, his shields, and his protective clothing weighed 175 pounds alone. And they came back. Come on, somebody, nobody would fight him. Every day he'd come down and he'd shout out these blasphemous statements about the God of Israel and insult them and their mamas and their kids and everybody else, and they wouldn't do anything about it. Well, Jesse said one day, hey, David, here, take some food down to your brothers that are out there fighting against the Philistines. David said, okay. And he said, by the way, while you're there, check on them. See how everybody's doing. How's the war going? Okay, I'll find out, Dad. So, like a good, faithful son, who, by the way, is already anointed king of Israel. He goes and he carries the stuff. And he brings it to his brothers, and he's kind of checking around. And, his brother's like, what are you doing here? You just come down and watch people fight. You're just an egotistical punk. Now, this is Tom's loose translation. If you want to get the actual wording, you need to read 1 Samuel 17. But for sake of time, I'm adding a little color to it and getting you the basic framework. So David's like, what's up? I'm just obeying Dad. I'm bringing you the stuff. And then that Goliath guy comes out. And he spews out all of his blasphemous stuff. And David's like, who is this uncircumcised guy talking like that in front of the nation and the armies of God Almighty? And so he said, I'm going to fight this guy. So he goes first of all, because the king, the almost opposed king, says, well, let me talk to this guy. So David goes over and he talks to King Saul. And he says, I'll go out and fight that guy. And Saul's like, you're just a kid. You're just a kid. What are you talking about? Well, David, tell him, hey, you know God? He took care of me when I'm out there taking care of the sheep. Here comes the lion. God delivered me from the paw of the lion. He delivered me from the paw of the bear. He'll deliver me from that big, ugly Philistine. All right. Here. Where my shield? Where my armor? So David puts an arm close around it. And I can't use this stuff. Here you have it. And so he goes out and he gathers how many stones? Young people who've heard this story 100 times? I'm holding up the answer. 5 smooth stones from a bubbling brook. And he puts it into a sling. And he rushes to the battle line. And there's Goliath. Round and round he goes. And whoosh, didn't know what hit him. Went right down to the ground. And I'll leave the rest of the story out, maybe. Until later. David was victorious over his giant. And so, what a powerful story for Noah, for Adam, Korah, that kid too. I could go, not only the young people here, you young people, David was a young man at this time. He was a youth. He would have been in, your youth group, okay? And he was victorious in a situation where the rest of the army of Israel was afraid. The king was afraid, but David wasn't afraid. And this is something we need to analyze. Some people like to use this metaphor then as anytime it's almost impossible odds coming up against a giant situation, we say it's like David and Goliath, almost like that's just an impossible situation. It was not an impossible situation. I'm going to show you why. And David knew it. David was not the one who was at disadvantage. David was not the one that was under-equipped. The one who was most at risk was a big, tall guy. He was the one who should have been frightened. But not David. just a couple minutes. I just got a couple of points to make, and then we'll be done. But before I do that, I want to express that this story was not just for David. It was not just for, to show a war victory in the nation of Israel in the historical progression of the nation. That story's for us today as well. And by the way, this is not just a young person's story. This is a story for us as well. As old as we are, we're going to face giants. Some of you sitting here right now are facing some giants. And how do you kill a giant? That's what it's going to be about today. How to be a giant killer. Because you can be a giant killer. Alright, the first thing, and these are going to be 3 easy points that you can always remember through this story. You got to have the right motives. You need to do a motive check as you're coming against your giant. David's motives were clear. Very clear. He wasn't there because he was on some ego trip like his brothers thought. He wasn't there because he was on a death wish. He loved life. Go to the book of Psalms and look at all these songs and things that are in there by David. He loved to sing. He loved his relationship with God. He loved his creation that God had provided for him. He was there to vindicate the name of God. He was there to bring glory to God. That's why he was there. His motives were correct. His motives were pure. Give God the glory. Think about that. As David looked over there, what was the first thing he said when he saw that guy? Who is this guy that he should talk that way in front of our God? His motives were clear, to bring glory to God. And so I say for you and I, we need to think about our giant. And as we approach this giant, think about our motives. What are your motives? Your giant might be a terrible boss. Your giant might be a terrible job. Your giant might be a co-worker who is not very pleasant to be around. How are you going to kill that giant? What is your motive? Now, you all know one of my very favorite theological movies is Bruce Almighty. Thank you. And what was his motive? Very self-serving. As he went to deal with his giants in life. His was not only self-serving, but it was also very, very arrogant. That he thought that somehow he could be God. And do better than God. No, we need to do a motive check as we face our giants, as David did. James chapter 4, verse 3. This is what happens. We don't receive what we need in giant killing. James tells us in chapter 4, verse 3, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your own pleasures. So he's saying that you're not going to get that giant killing power if your motive is very self-serving. Think about your giants. Sometimes that giant, the problem could actually be what? Me, and my ego, and my pride, and my arrogance. How can I speak so authoritatively to that issue? Because that's one of my giants. And it has been for years. So you got to have the correct motives as you're going into battle to kill a giant. Number 2, you need to use the right methods. David went to Saul, and Saul says, here, do it the old traditional way, wear my armor. And he's like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. This hasn't been proven by me. All the time David was out there in the field with the shepherd, as a shepherd with the sheep, God had shown him about this sling, and don't underestimate this sling. This was the .45 caliber of his day. There are people in Afghanistan and other places in the Middle East where they continue to use that sling to this day. And I'm telling you, it's a lethal weapon, and they're extremely accurate. And so this giant, Goliath, he was the one who was disadvantaged. Not David. David had a talent that God had blessed him with. All right? And yet when he comes to talk to Saul, he's like, oh, you can't do it. You can't do it. You're just a kid. And no, David knew he could do it. And the thing is, he was approaching it not just because he was good at sling, but he was approaching it by faith. This was his correct method, right here. Whether God had taught him how to do a sling or a javelin or anything else, the thing is, he was approaching it in faith. This is a vital tool as we go to slay a giant. You've got to have faith. You've got to have faith. Whatever you do, do it in faith, trusting that God is greater than the problem. God is greater than your giant. God who worked in the past is working now. And those giants are there for a reason. They help us grow in the Lord. It was Warren Wiersbe who said those giants are just our bumps or, to help us grow closer to the Lord. Put whatever metaphor you want. But as we come up against giant after giant after giant, by the way, this wouldn't be David's last giant, would it? All right? There'll always be another giant after this one's slain. And so we need to continue to walk in faith. And then number 3. You have to have an expectation that God's going to act. You need to have an expectation that God is going to act. David was ridiculed by his brother. Think about this. We'll go through this story. He was ridiculed by his brothers. He was doubted. Oh, he was ridiculed by the giant too, right? Who are you? Yeah. What are you sending me? Dead dogs with sticks and stuff? So he's ridiculed by the giant. He was given doubt by the king of Israel. Now think about all those things coming in this young man's life that would cause him to have a doubt of faith. Did he have plenty enough freedom? You know what? I just can't do this. Let me just get back home with the sheep. It's quiet. I can play my flute and my harp and all that and not worry about this giant. Now, young people, hear what I'm saying. You're going to have adults that are going to discourage you. And they think they're doing right. Don't get me wrong. And some just aren't right. It could be a counselor at school. It could be a teacher. It could be a relative. But if God has given you a vision, has put something on your heart, don't allow adults to discourage you. Don't let your enemies discourage you. Don't even let your own failings discourage you. David had plenty of excuses to quit. But he didn't. He had an expectation that God loves me, I trust in Him, and He will deliver me. And I'll tell you my own story. When I was a youngster, so to speak, I was in my 20s, and I felt like God wanted me to go to seminary. He wanted me to be in full-time ministry. Well, I was kind of getting there later in age. I was 30 years old. I was married. I had 3 children. And so I had a very good job. And so I had to leave that job to go to school. And I was trying to figure out a way how to do this. One of the ways was raise support through different churches and stuff. And I sent out these letters asking if they would help me go to school. And I still have to this day a whole stack of letters. And they all started out the same way. Wow, that's a really great idea. We're praying for you. And we think you're going to do good. Then that word came. Hey, you know what that word was? But and you can fill in the blank. We're in the process of building a parking lot, but we have a tight budget. But it always resulted in, sorry, no dinero for you. And I remember sitting at my desk that one day and thinking, I'm just going to give up. It's just not going to happen. You know, God talks to us. And I didn't hear some voice from heaven, but I heard it inside me say, if I want you to do this, I'll supply whatever you need. And there was a meager little budget for a wife and 3 kids, to meet. He says, I own the cattle 1,000 hills. You think I can't meet that little budget? I own everything in the universe. You think I can't meet that little budget? I remember exactly that moment that I went from trusting in myself and even other people to just simply trusting in God. And I said, fine. If He wants me to do it, it'll happen. And I tell you what, it happened. Because He made it happen. Because I quit trusting in myself. I quit listening to the folks, even good people who were discouraging me, and trusted that God will make it happen. And He did. So be careful, young people, and not so young people. There's always going to be a reason when you're facing your giant, like all the armies of Israel, to cower back and not engage in faith that God will act. And I tell you, that was Saul's problem. That was Saul's problem. He had no expectation that God would act. He saw that guy, that big guy, and he was bigger than him, and he cowered in fear. Who was it that should have gone and engaged that guy? Of all the nation of Israel, it should have been Saul. Where was he? He was back in the tent, behind the armies. And I got to tell you a verse, and I want you guys to look at this verse, because this is superficial religious talk. Because once David told Saul, I'll fight that dude, Saul said this in verse 37. He said these words, go and the Lord be with you. Now, generally speaking, those are nice words. Go and the Lord be with you. But these words are empty. Did Saul believe those words? No, he didn't believe them. If Saul believed those words, he had gotten off his cowardly little behind and moved out trusting in God and engaged that giant himself. No, this is superficial religious talk. He didn't believe what he was saying. You could almost hear him say, almost mockingly, go and the Lord be with you. Go and the Lord be with you. Really? Parent, would you say to your child as they're going to college, go and the Lord be with you? If it's not followed up by your own faithful action, it's just simple, empty, religious talk. The only thing Saul had in his mind was, well, that kid's going to get killed. He had no trust in God. He had no expectation that God would deliver this young man. None whatsoever. So when you hear Saul say, go and the Lord be with you, it is not a blessing. It's empty religious talk. And there are so many people who are just doing an empty religious talk. Paul had to deal with it in his time. He said the kingdom of heaven is not about simple talk. It's action. It's action. Stepping out in faith, believing that God will act. Well, God had delivered David over and over again. Out in the field, whatever enemy came against him, he knew that God would act again. You know what's funny? Because Goliath had an expectation too, didn't he? Goliath had an expectation too. Look in verses 45 through 46. Well, let me back up actually. Because Goliath had an expectation. He looked over David. Okay? Imagine being 9 foot 6 inches. When he said he looked over David, I mean he looked over. He's looking at this little shrimp. And it says, he says to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And then he says, come here. I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. I am just going to slaughter you, you little puny punk. Right? He had an expectation. What was his expectation based on? I'm 9 foot 6. You're just a little shrimp. I'm a seasoned warrior. I got a lot of spears and swords and all this kind of stuff. All you got is a little sling and a stick. This is a slam dunk. This is a wipeout. It was all based upon his size, his physicalness, himself. Earlier in chapter 16, verse 7, as Jesse was sizing up all the people, Samuel was sizing up all Jesse's kids. He was doing the same thing. But God said something Very important, didn't he? I don't look at the outside. I look at what? The heart. David had a heart. Don't underestimate those little guys. I coached middle school football. One of my best defensive ends was a little shrimp. And we went out to play Alabama somewhere. But anyhow, doesn't matter. So their team had all these big guys. I looked at him and they're like, this is easy. Except he was fast as greased lightning. And those big guys come over and on, and he was around. He tackled the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage. And he had heart. He loved it. So don't judge people, and don't let other people judge you because you're this tall, or this or that. But rather have a heart for God. Be like David, be a man or a girl after God's own heart. Don't listen to their expectations. Don't cave into them. Yeah, Goliath out there have their own expectations. They're not based on God. Listen to what David said. And I love his words there. He says, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin. Okay? So you come against me with the normal ways of the world. He says, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. I come to you in the name and the power and the authority of God Almighty. He said, this day, you read the rest. Some of it's not fit for little kids to hear. So you read it the rest. But he's basically, I'm going to whoop you. All right? I'm going to whoop you. And he did. With God's power. Oh yeah. Let our youth surprise us. They can do so much more. You think, whatever you do, don't discourage yourself. Pray and think about it. You know the different elements of the blessings, right? Spoken word. Meaningful touch. Words of high value, I should have said. We need to make a commitment to them. Have a vision for them and a commitment to see that vision done. So what did Saul say? Go. The Lord be with you. Go. The Lord be with you. Well, I sit in my tent and drink tea. Why did you go with him, Saul? No. Go. The Lord be with you. Let us never do that with our kids. We rather speak a vision for them. Words of high value. Encourage them. Not discourage them. Let's think about the giants that we're facing today, you're facing today. And I'm not in any way trying to minimize your giants. No way. I'm trying to maximize our God and what's available to you. Begin with that right motive. Use what God has given you and expect by faith that God will act. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you so much for the young man David. What an inspiration his faith is to all who really read this story and to see how you work mightily through him. And Lord, you promised that you will work mightily through us as well. Because Paul told us you didn't give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but one of power and love and self-control. And so, Lord, I pray that you will work through all of our young people to be everything that you've created them to be. And let no adult, no fellow peer, no relative, no one discourage them. But rather, Lord, that faith in them would just grow up to do a mighty work of giant killing in their world. And also for us, older adults as well. Lord, help us to overcome the giants in our life by faith, trusting that you work in our lives. Father, you've told us before, you've told the nation of Israel, the battle belongs to you. So Lord, why do we keep wanting to take the battle on ourselves again and again and again? Father, may we just humbly submit before you and trust in you. And yet do what you have trained us to do. And Lord, I know that each and every one of us will be victorious because you promised it. You said you'd be with us always, even to the very end of the age. Your glory, which will result in our immense joy. We pray this in Jesus' name, and amen. Lord bless you all. Have a great week.